Hello, I'm Toshiyuki Nakamura, Developing Business Manager at Line. The title of my presentation today is Background of Next Generation Marketing Data Utilization Infrastructure Business Manager. This is the agenda for today. First, I'll talk about what Business Manager is and what it can do. In this part, we will also explain the features of Business Manager, which was an issue in the development of Business Manager, and the mechanisms that existed before Business Manager was introduced. The next section describes the system architecture of Business Manager. Then, I'd like to share some of the challenges we faced in developing Business Manager and the approach we took to address them. So, let me start my presentation. Firstly, what is Business Manager? Business Manager is a platform system that allows advertisers to effectively utilize various data across all of Line's marketing products. You can integrate data from various marketing products, such as Line Ads and Line Official accounts, and make effective use of the data for ad distribution and other purposes. I just mentioned the various marketing products of Line. When you think of Line, you probably have a strong image of consumer applications such as the Line messaging application, but we also offer several business-oriented products that were mentioned in the previous slide. We will also introduce Line's B2B product to help you better understand Business Manager. Line's B2B products include Line Official accounts, Line Ads, and Line Point. Of course, of these, we'll be introducing the Line Official accounts and Line Ads that can be connected to Business Manager at the time of the initial release. Some of you may have seen the signs in stores around the town saying that they are looking for friends with the official Line account. Line is a service that allows companies from large companies to small stores to communicate with Line users through their official accounts. And Line Ads. This is a platform for distributing advertisements to Line users through a variety of media. Some of you may have seen the ads on the screen of the Line app. This is also one of the ads that are distributed using the Line Ads platform. Coming back to the Business Manager diagram. In Business Manager, you can connect your service accounts, such as the Line Ads and Line Official accounts that I just explained. By connecting accounts, you can consolidate and manage the data held by the accounts. At the time of release, 2 services shown in this figure will be supported, and the number of accounts that can be connected will be expanded. The data from the connected accounts can then be used to deliver ads and messages. In addition, data analysis and reporting across products will be added, and we plan to continue evolving. I mentioned evolution, but let me also explain the title, What Makes Business Manager Next Generation? In fact, Business Manager has had a system in place for utilizing data across Line Official accounts and Line Ads for some time. It's called cross-targeting. In some cases, large companies are running multiple brands for their Line Official accounts and Line Ads. In the case of brand A and brand B in this diagram, within the same brand, data could be shared and utilized from the Line Official accounts to Line Ads. However, due to system and rule restrictions, data could not be shared across brand A's account and brand B's brand, even if they were the same company. Business Manager allows you to share data between accounts across brands within the same company. In this diagram, it will be possible to share the utilized brand A's line ads data with brand B's line ads account. As I just mentioned, the system architecture of Business Manager was decided as we developed Business Manager to overcome the limitation of the existing system. This led to some development issues, which will be explained in the second half of the session. Next, let's take a look at the features of Business Manager. In Business Manager, you can create groups called Organization in the management screen for each company that is an advertiser. By connecting line ads and official line accounts to Organization, the data held by the accounts can be shared and used between the accounts. You can connect your account to Organization from the management screen of the respective system for line ads and line official accounts. At the time of the first release, there are two main types of data available between accounts. The first is a JavaScript snippet called a line tag, which can be embedded in a website to measure conversions and so on. The other is audience data, which is data on which users' ads can be delivered to. Right now, these are the only type of account that can be connected and data that can be shared in Business Manager, but more types will be supported in the future. Next, there is an authentication function that allows companies to use Business Manager with peace of mind. I mentioned earlier that you can connect accounts by creating an organization, but that is not enough to enable sharing of audience data between accounts. Line operators will use internal tools to check whether the organization and the account are operated by the same company. Audience data can then only be shared between approved organizations and accounts. You can also set permissions within the organization, such as which accounts can share which data. It is also possible to set permissions such as sharing all types of data to all accounts and organization, which is like a wildcard, or sharing only specific audience data to specific accounts. This is a technical point that needs to be addressed in the second half of the session. Finally, there is also the ability for the organization itself to create line tags and audience data. Of course, these data created by the organization itself can also be shared with other accounts. So far, we have talked about the specifications of Business Manager. You may have felt that there are several points where there are multiple services accounts and types of data that may complicate the development of the system. From here, we will gradually get into the topic of how the issue is solved technically. But first, let me look back at the first slide a little bit. In fact, Business Manager does not realize the necessary functions by itself. It is working by adding a data sharing authority management system to the existing system. I explained that there is an existing system called cross-targeting, and linedevday is the one that makes this possible. linedevday is a platform that collects, processes, and provides advertising data for Line's internal use. It is responsible for storing and processing data generated on the Line platform and data managed by companies, and providing such data to B2B services such as Line Ads and Line Official accounts. For more detailed information on linedevday, the session on linedevday at last year's Dev Day is very informative. I have included the URL at the bottom of this slide for those who are interested. return to the description of Business Manager. Before Business Manager was created, linedmp and other line services worked together to provide audience data. By adding Business Manager's privilege management function on top of this system, we are able to share data across accounts. There are two main patterns of data linkage between existing systems and Business Manager. The first is a REST API platform. Until now, we have been using the linedmp API to access the audience data managed by linedmp from other systems such as Line official accounts and Line ads. In addition to that, the API of a Business Manager is called inside the DMP to check permissions. And another data linkage pattern is messaging through Kafka. When a Business Manager user changes shared permission settings between accounts, the change is saved in MySQL. But then reads the changes and notifies the linedmp via Kafka that the data sharing has changed. This was a difficult part that required a lot of consideration, which I will explain later. Since it was a bit abstract, I will now introduce some of the specific technologies used in Business Manager. As a programming language, use Kotlin. We are making full use of Kotlin's features in my development, which I will explain later. We are using Spring Boot as a framework. As for middleware, we use MySQL as the main storage, Redis for caching and locking, and as mentioned in the previous slide, Kafka to notify each services of data changes and to synchronize some data from other services. And for infrastructure, we are using Verda, our internal private cloud. Considering the short time frame of the initial development and the importance of a system that handles data, we have adopted more technologies that have a proven track record in my department. I would like to share with you some of the challenges during the development of Business Manager and the lessons learned on how we responded to them. First topic is about the data linkage with other systems. Please take a look at the system overview diagram, which has been shown several times here. Business Manager notifies linedmp that the permission settings in the DB have been changed via Kafka. There were several issues here, one of which was how to handle database and Kafka in the same transaction. In Business Manager, users can change the settings of sharing permissions from the administration screen. In this case, we needed to ensure that linedmp was notified that the data had been changed in the correct order and without error. The reason is that on the linedmp side, for example, the fact that audience data sharing has started or stopped is handled by receiving the changes on the Business Manager side in the correct order through Kafka. The problem here was how to handle database and Kafka in the same transaction. We discussed several ways to achieve this with the team and came up with 3 ideas. The first method is to use API callback to publish a message that the shared permissions have changed after the DB update process in the same transaction of the database. After that, the consumer can call the API to check if the changes are reflected in the database. It is possible that the data is published to Kafka in a transaction, but is rolled back and not reflected in the database, so an API call is required. The advantage of this method was above all the simplicity of implementation and also the fact that it is a proven method that is often used by other teams. Since we were in the early stages of development and didn't have much time, these advantages were very attractive. However, due to performance concerns with the API for callbacks, we decided to forego this approach early on. The second method is to use CDC, change data capture. Our development had an experience of using the MySQL log to notify Kafka of changes using software called Divisium. The advantage of this method was that it could be processed in near real time and that it was already being used by other teams. However, there were some disadvantages. The structure of the table that manages shared privilege setting is complex and spans multiple tables, making it difficult to design consumers, and the separate work required to set up infrastructure seemed to be hard to schedule. We also decided to forego this method used by other members as it does not guarantee order and we would end up needing an API callback to check the results.
The third method is to write an event to the event queue table in the same transaction when a change in shared permissions occur. After doing so, you can pull the event queue table with batch and notify Kafka of any changes. If a record has been sent, it will be updated with a column indicated that it has been sent, so that it will not be sent to Kafka twice. The advantage of this method is that it is simple to implement and it also ensures correct order. The disadvantages are that the polling interval may not be real-time enough and that it does not scale well when there are many changes. However, this option was chosen because business managers' requirements do not require a high degree of real-time performance, and there are no use cases where permissions are changed frequently. The final architecture looked like this after a few refinements. Changes to shared permission settings and to the table corresponding to the event queue are written in the same transaction. The first batch reads the changes from the table in the events queue, resolves the shared permission into a usable form, and writes them to a table in another DB. The reason for the shared permissions is that, as mentioned in the Business Manager feature description, there is a wildcard specification that allows all accounts in the organization to share all types of data. The second batch notifies Kafka of the resolved sharing permissions. The advantages of this two-tiered system are, in the event of a problem, it is possible to resend the message by simply changing the column that manages the status of the message to Kafka. This also makes recovery operations easier. Next, we will talk about development in collaboration with multiple teams. Let's go back to the system overview diagram for a moment. I'm mainly in charge of developing the Business Manager backend, but the Business Manager backend development team provides several REST APIs to other teams. Firstly, the API for the admin panel. This is used by the front-end team for development as the admin panel is built as a single-page application. Then there are the APIs for the internal systems. For Line DMP, there is an API that returns the sharing permission settings. For Line official accounts, Line advertising, there are also APIs that allow you to connect your accounts to Business Manager. During the initial development of Business Manager, my backend team had to decide on the specifications of these APIs. It was also a critical path in terms of schedule, so we needed to get it out to other teams as soon as possible. The challenge here was the cost of creating and maintaining API documentation. It depends on the department, but in my department, we used to put the API documents in the internal wiki. This would incur the cost of double maintenance of the code and documentation if the specification changes. During the initial development of Business Manager, the API documentation had to be created quickly while understanding the difficult specifications and keep to a tight schedule. We addressed this issue by adopting springdoc-openapi. Springdoc-openapi is a library that allows you to annotate your Spring controllers to generate OpenAPI version 3 JSON and YAML. This allows for usage of Swagger UI in specific endpoints to view the latest API documents generated by your controllers at any time. In addition to browsing, you can also run the API to see the response. Kotlin is also supported and works well with Kotlin types such as non-null, which is considered a required element. You can also write programs to customize it to read your project's own annotations and add the necessary entries to the documentation. Now, let me show you how to use it in a more concrete way. When you create a Spring controller, you can annotate it with @tag, @operation, @schema, or any other Swagger API annotation. You will then be able to view the API documentations in the Swagger UI. You can also run the API from within the Swagger UI. You can get these OpenAPI version 3 files at specific endpoints, so you can use them for more than just viewing them in the Swagger UI. We use GitHub Enterprise for our development, and when we send a pull request, we generate API documentation for each branch. This makes it easier for reviewers to check the API specification. Due to the compatibility with the method of uploading static files to the company's file storage server, we use Redoc as a viewer in this case. In addition, the front-end team, which creates the Business Manager administration screen, uses TypeScript to develop the single-page application screen. We use a library called OpenAPI TypeScript to generate TypeScript types and to streamline the integration with the backend API. The OpenAPI TypeScript command generates TypeScript type definitions for the API path and request response, so we can respond smoothly to any additions or changes to the API. Last but not least, a slightly more advanced method. Since the Business Manager admin screen is intended for use by corporate users, there is the ability to manage permission by role, such as admin or general user. We also control which users can access the API endpoint by putting our own annotations in the controller. The class that implements the operation customizer interface provided by springdoc-openapi reads the @auth annotation and registers it when springdoc-openapi is initialized. Then, the documentation will automatically reflect which permissions have access to this endpoint. The markdown string set in the code on the left will be reflected in the document on the right on the Swagger UI. I will now touch on the programming approach. Business Manager had a problem of having so many types of IDs. Since Business Manager connects to other accounts and shares the data of the account, it has many types of IDs. There are more than 20 different IDs in the system, including the database PKID. To give you an example, Business Manager's organization ID, line advertising and line official account IDs, audience data, line tag ID, IDs of users logged into the admin screen, and more IDs will be added in the future as the number of connected accounts and data associated with those accounts increase. In order to be able to deal with these IDs in a programming context without making mistakes, we have tried to treat them as value objects. A value object is an object in the context of domain-driven design that is characteristic by its value equality, comparability, and immutability. In Kotlin, they can be easily created by simply wrapping a primitive value in a data class. In this Kotlin code example, a data class called full_id, which is represented in one line. From the time of the ID of the value object is received by the controller to the time it is inserted or updated into the database, it is used consistently within the program. This ensures that there are no assignment errors in programming. In fact, as you can see in the example code, if you write with value objects, mistakes in argument assignments will be error at compile time and will not occur. There are also other benefits of making it a value object. Combining it with the springdoc-openapi mechanism introduced earlier also makes documentation creation more efficient. We can annotate the defined IDs and reuse them in the documentation. In addition, I would like to mention that we have used Kotlin's features to our advantage in developing Business Manager. Null safety is a basic feature of Kotlin which allows you to distinguish between nullable and non-null classes and program them in a type-safe way. In addition, there are many types, such as accounts and data in Business Manager, and the number is expected to increase in the future. Using sealed class, sealed interface, enum, and plus when for each account and data type, we handle the process well. In addition, although we haven't used it yet because it was experimental at the beginning of development, we intend to use inline class which wraps primitive values without performance overhead. As you can see, Kotlin has a lot of useful features for development, and in my department, Kotlin is used a lot. There will be a session about Kotlin at this Dev Day, so if you are interested, please check it out. Now that we have covered some of the technical details, let me share one last thing I've learned from developing Business Manager. Business Manager was developed by a new team that was just started in January. There was also COVID, so we had to develop completely in full remote mode. We started the team development in this environment, and there were a few practices that we found effective. First of all, we tried out mob programming because we wanted to get a better understanding of the details of developing in a new team. Mob programming means that the whole team does coding together. It is easier to understand it as pair programming with more than 2 people. A person called the driver does the actual coding, and another person called the navigator and others tell the driver what code to write. Usually in mob programming, the whole team shares the same screen and keyboard, but since we were working remotely, we used Zoom, and all the participants shared the coder or the driver's screen. When the driver switches, we push the changes into a Git branch, and the next driver pulls the branch into their machine. We also use Zoom to share screens for release work and infra work to work in a mob. This is my personal opinion, but I think this practice is effective in sharing technical knowledge and building teamwork in a new team. We also leave Zoom connected all the time with both camera and microphone off, so we can talk to others whenever needed. Basically, we use Slack for asynchronous communication, but in the case of Business Manager, it is useful when we are not sure about the specifications, and it is faster to talk while sharing the screen. We started to have what we call a morning meeting every day at 11 a.m. It's a place where we can talk about whatever we want to talk about as a team. We also use Trello to keep track of what we need to do on that day. One of the things we did that was a little bit different was to link Trello with Grafana, a monitoring tool, to check our progress. Specifically, we use Grafana's push gateway function from a local PC to send regular point totals and store the data. I wanted to use a burn-down chart in Trello to track our progress, but the plugin is paid and needs customization, so this is how we did it. When you work remotely, it's often difficult to see what other people are doing, so we send all notifications to Slack. For example, pull requests on GitHub, changes on Trello, CI results, etc. We also have a dedicated bot for system releases so that we can complete them on Slack. However, we try to separate channels for things that are frequently sent to Slack. Here is a summary. Business Manager is the next generation foundation for the use of marketing data. In the future, we will continue to expand our connectivity services and continue to develop. The business requirements are complex and there are many systematic changes to be solved, but the rewards are great. If you're interested in joining our team, we'd be very happy to hear from you. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.